Welcome, everybody, to our Zoom Touch of Torah and Touch of Music with Rabbi Barry Silver and Cantorial Spiritual Leader Andy Susman. Thank you for joining us this evening, April 12th, 2022. Shalom to you all, and take it away, Rabbi and Andy.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It's great to be here, especially with our Cantorial Spiritual Leader, Andy Susman. We created that term just for him because he sings beautifully, but he's also a spiritual leader, and he's all in one. And we all learn a lot from him, including me. And so I'm very glad to be here with him to share a little bit about the Torah reading this Shabbat, which is going out of sequence. We're reaching back into Exodus to read Bo, which has a lot of different meanings. You could have a bow and arrow. A beau is your boyfriend, B-E-A-U, and it also means come here. Or in this case, it means go to Pharaoh is what God's saying, Bo le Pharoah. So we're going to read out of sequence this Shabbat about Pharaoh and about the Exodus. It's not something that just we dreamed up at Va-Dor. This is the custom that Jews will do throughout the world when they read the Torah reading for this particular Shabbat. They always say, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Why is this night different than all other nights? This Seder will be different than many other Seders because we're actually seeing a struggle between Moses and Pharaoh in actuality in Ukraine. We're seeing Pharaoh in the guise of Putin, and we're seeing Moses represented by Zelenskyy. There are some differences, but we do have a Jewish leader who is leading his country and leading the free world against tyranny and oppression, and against someone who, like Pharaoh, treats people like objects and considers their lives to be forfeit. So we're certainly tying that in. By the way, I just want you to know also, I've led quite a few rallies, fundraisers, concerts, and I met a pastor along the way in Boca, and I told him I'm interested in helping refugees. He just texted me about 2 hours ago, told me there's a Ukrainian family of 7, 3 adults, 4 kids. They're coming in through Mexico as we speak, and they're going to be arriving in this neighborhood. We don't know when, maybe in 3-4 days, but they are looking for help. So if you know someone who can take in 7 people, let me know. If not, if you know somebody who could take in 1 person, let me know. There's a husband and wife, and then an older gentleman, their father. He looks like he's like 70s maybe, and then some kids. So there might be somebody at Va-Dor who might have room to take in a senior citizen and provide a place to stay until we find more permanent lodging. But I like Va-Dor to be committed with this church, and we'll form a little committee so you could either house people, you could provide food or clothing if you have extra, or you could write a check. But I want to welcome the stranger at Passover, and I was hoping they'd come in time for them to sit at the Passover Seder that I'm performing at Mirasol on Friday and Saturday. It looks like they're just going to miss it, but maybe not. But if you happen to know any refugees around from Ukraine, they're more than welcome. So I wanted to talk about that. So let's talk about the Torah reading about Bo.
Let me throw a song in real quick, and then you do that.
Go right ahead. Okay.
We'll do periodic segues here.
Okay.
So Rabbi hit on the theme of Pesach is here and now. It's front and center. It's actually always front and center. We don't necessarily pay attention to the suffering that's on the news. We maybe selectively listen to things that we choose to focus on, but this one seems to be in our psyche, on our radar. One of the phrases from the Haggadah, which is very relevant, is B'chol dor Va-Dor, chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. We must regard ourselves as having personally went forth from Egypt. And as much as this analogy might have been overblown a month or so ago before what we're witnessing, but we're kind of witnessing, somewhat of a genocide or a Holocaust of sorts, a mini Hitler or a Hitler wannabe. So here are these words. בכל דור ודור חייב אדם לראות את עצמו כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. בכל דור ודור חייב אדם לראות את עצמו כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים.
Very nice. Andy, did you want to share some thoughts about the Torah reading of Bo and the Passover?
Well, once again, I mean, the text itself speaks to the moment that, as Rabbi was talking about, we've got some refugees that are coming to our community, and hopefully, speaking of welcoming the stranger, I would have hoped that our country would have been a little more magnanimous in terms of welcoming 250,000. That might have been the minimal threshold at this juncture, but I'm sure the numbers will go up as the exodus, modern day exodus, increases. So I'll just keep interweaving as you begin to share.
Well, the problem is the people are lost in a bureaucracy, which is making it very difficult for them to get here and to settle. Getting back to the Torah reading, the Torah reading is quite interesting in many ways. One of them is that God tells Moses, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart so that he's not going to let the people out, in order to demonstrate for everyone my power, and that I have the ability to show my power over and above Pharaoh. And so, because you wonder, Pharaoh, why doesn't he get the message? I mean, he's getting clobbered over the head with plague after plague. It's obviously supernatural, something weird's going on, and he just continues to refuse to let the people go. And the Torah says, well, God hardened his heart. So it's really a very troubling concept that Pharaoh brought on all these horrible things in his country through supposedly no fault of his own. He couldn't help it. God manipulated him to do this, and then in turn punished all the people of Egypt. You can say that doesn't sound too fair, but I would like to point this out. The silent majority, who's not mentioned in the Haggadah? Well, Moses isn't mentioned very often because they didn't want him to be deified. They wanted to put the power and the responsibility for the victory on God. Pharaoh certainly entertained center stage. Where are the Egyptian people? Where are all the Egyptians when all these horrible things were happening? The plagues, the hail, the locusts, the death of animals, the boils. Where were they? Well, they're silent. They're conspicuous in their silence. Where were the protests? Where were the demonstrations? All you hear is, well, the leaders, some of Pharaoh's advisors were saying, hey, you know what? You might want to reconsider, but that's about all they did. And when he said no, then they went along with the flow. That's an important lesson. In today's society, the society itself, the American people, any people, we're responsible by our silence. So where were we when Putin was doing all these horrible things before? We've been silent. Where have we been when Israel is vilified by the United Nations? And where are we when Muslim terrorists are destroying the free world? Do we say something about the ideology and challenge it? Do we spend trillions in Afghanistan and never once raise any issues with the ideology that spawns all this violence? When our planet is being systematically destroyed so that our children will inherit very little compared to what we did? This is the lesson, my friends, of Passover, that we are silent at our own peril. And if the people of Egypt had spoken up, the story might have been very, very different. That, I think, is probably the most important. There's a lot of important lessons, and this is one of the most important ones. Sharon, I do love your background. I think it's really cool, the Egyptian background. I also want to share something. I'm becoming a little more mellow in my old age, not quite as edgy as I used to be. So I'm just going to tell you this. I have conceived of the 10 ways that you can tell if you are at a Republican Seder. Okay, now, in the old days, I would have freely shared all of this with you now, but I don't want to offend too many people. If I offend a few people, I can live with that, but I don't want to offend too many. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to just let you know that they're pretty amusing and you may want to share them at your own. If you would like to know about them, contact me and I'll be glad to send you a copy that you can share with your friends. And perhaps I'll send it out on the Va-Dor newsletter if anybody approves of that, which probably the chances are slim to none. So contact me if you're interested, but they're pretty good. I'll just give you one. They refuse to answer the 4 questions without a subpoena. So anyway, it goes on from there. Okay, now I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Andy, and then we'll open it up to everybody else.
Well, I've got another song or two, and then we'll figure out. So real brief. When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down Moses, or maybe go down Volodymyr, way down in Russia land. Tell old Vladimir, let my people go. So you have Volodymyr and Vladimir. Let my people go. They could fight over whose name is spelled or pronounced correctly. That could have been an interesting, less filling, tastes great. Maybe they wouldn't have had to go on to fisticuffs if they were just talking, a verbal, challenge.
Before the next song.
Also, the idea of redemption. So Rabbi raised some very, well, as always, some very interesting points about where were we? Where was the EU the last number of years when they were trying to get cozy up with this energy pipeline? And I thought it was probably maybe a good idea that if their economies were interwoven, there'd be less of a reason to have this kind of conflagration. But I guess I didn't know what I was doing, and a lot of other people weren't either. So the idea of redemption, each one of us has their own soul searching and their own exoduses that they experience in their lifetime, that we might want to do a 12-step gathering to share some of that kind of information. But here we go. Wandering in the desert, so easy to feel alone. We all need to know redemption from a hand stronger than our own. From a hand stronger than our own. From a hand stronger than our own. Redemption, 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 redemption. So one of these days, or maybe later on in this sharing, we might want to share some exodus that each of us experienced that we escaped. It could have been an illness. It could have been a financial crisis, all sorts of situations. Okay, thank you.
Well, let me pick up on something Andy said, and then we're going to open it up to everybody else. Vladimir was actually a prince in the 10th century who brought Christianity to Russia and to the Ukraine. As you may know, the church was divided into the Roman Catholic and the Greek Orthodox. Out of the Greek Orthodox, they started moving north, and then an offshoot of that was launched by Prince Vladimir, who converted to Christianity. And right after he converted, he decided to convert all these other people through conquest. And he formed what they now call the Russian Orthodox Church. And he went into the Ukraine and went into Kiev. And he conquered that, and he made them Russian Orthodox. That is why, my friends, in Russia, they believe that Kiev and Ukraine are really part of Russia, because in that day they were, and they were all under one hegemony, under the Russian Orthodox Church. You might wonder, how is it that these people believe crazy stuff about Ukraine? Who would believe that Zelenskyy is a neo-Nazi? Who would believe this stuff? Why would these soldiers think that they're going in to destroy the Nazis? And why would they think that they're going to be welcomed with open arms? How could they be brainwashed in that way? It's because of the influence of the church. Russian Orthodox Church brainwashes people for a living. And so does Putin. He tries to brainwash people, and together they've allied. It's very interesting to try to find out, why do people think the way they do? We don't do this to justify it. We don't do this to think, okay, now that I understand, I justify what Russian soldiers are doing. Now I think it's okay. We do it because if you want to combat an enemy, you do have to confront them on the battlefield. But you also want to confront the battlefield of ideas. You want to understand, how did they get to think this way? Because if we could get them to think differently, then we wouldn't have to even battle with arms. This struggle that we're in is two or threefold. One part is military, and sadly, we need to fight that with vigor, much more vigorously than we have been, I believe, and we should help Ukraine. But we also want to engage in the battlefield of ideas, and that is done in large part also by sending information into Russia, by getting the word out inside of Russia about what's really going on. By the way, the word Vladimir, like many words, is Russian, but it also has a Ukrainian equivalent. So it's spelled Volodymyr in Ukrainian, Vladimir in Russian. And the word means, mir is peace, ironically enough. And Volod is like a conqueror. It's of like who's a ruler or conqueror, somebody who rules in peace, which is very ironic that Putin's name would also be Vladimir. I'll open this up now to others to share your thoughts about Passover, messages, maybe some Seders that you had when you were a kid, or even when you were an adult, some fond memories of Passover. I think Passover is one of those holidays where we have some just wonderful memories of family gatherings, just so much fun and joyous. And so if anybody wants to share, this is your big chance. Anybody at all?
I was hoping you would share that song with us, Rabbi, that you sing in, what is it? Is about a minute, and Chad Gadya, I think it is, the one that you do, the speedy
Oh yeah,
song.
yeah. Okay, here you go. I gotta catch my breath. Thanking the Holy One, praise be in this. Wait. Thanking the Holy One, praise be in this. Destroy the angel of death, the slew the butcher, kill the axe, break the water, the quench fire, to burn the stick, to beat the bit, to captivate the king. My father, what produces him? Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. And see, at our house, we were trained to do everything fast because people wanted to eat. So we can do everything very, very fast. And we had a Seder every night of Passover because we loved Passover, and we invited people from all over the community, the mayor, our teachers, our sports coaches, our friends, especially people of other religions. We wanted them to see what Passover was like as a way to get Jews and other religions close together in a family environment. So we had Passover Seder every night of Passover. It's really wild. And the Seders we did with my dad, he was amazing. He had a great sense of humor, a powerful message, but also a joyous, loving way. And he always had the line that he would say to my mom. My mom would be slaving away, working the kitchen. Imagine serving all these people 7 days for a Seder. And he'd always say to her, when she'd be coming out with some food or something, now Passover means the end of slavery, but don't you get any ideas. Now, in today's world, people would probably take great offense. What a horrible thing to say. But in those days, everybody knew that my dad had such love and respect, admiration for my mom, and she for him. And she would always participate. Every year, she would do Who Knows 13, standing on her head. And that was also done very, very quickly. He goes, who knows 13? I know 13. 13 attributes of God, 12 clouds, 11 stars, 2 reading, 10 commandments, 9 festivals, 8 lights, 7 days a week, 6 days a week, 5 weeks, 4 months a year, 3 days, 2 days, 1 God of the world. And we would do everything quick, but then we would slow it down and we'd sing Echad Neyodeya, Chad Gadya. And so I have very, very fond memories of Passover, but I'd love to hear some of yours if you'd like to share.
I remember the Seders being so long. And we wouldn't eat until like 11:30 at night.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
How
Well,
long
real
Seders, Rabbi?
Well, in response to Rabbi sharing some of his shtick for Pesach, I actually have a Pesach video that I will send to Sharon, and I'll encourage her to send it to all of you. It's 7.5 minutes. It's action-packed. It doesn't cover everything, obviously, 7.5 minutes, but it's got some really good content. And mentioning the Chad Gadya song, back in 1985, I led my first official formal Seder at the Jacaranda Country Club in Plantation. And I was all ready to go, doing all the tradition. And you know the fifth question, when do we eat? That's all they care about. So that was part A. Part B is they're not sticking around for after. There's no after. It says we're out of here. So I had prepared the Chad Gadya in Aramaic, and they weren't really interested. And I So I said at that point, I decided that I would learn Chad Gadya in English with hand motions. So I have this video that has Chad Gadya and a few other things. So real quick, I'll introduce it to you. You make some horns like a little goat, baby goat. Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. And you take your right hand and kind of go, my father bought for 2 zuzim. Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. Then came the cat and ate the kid. My father bought for 2 zuzim. Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. Then came the dog that bit the cat that ate the kid. My father bought for 2 zuzim. Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. Then came the stick and beat the dog that bit the cat that ate the kid. My father bought for 2 zuzim. Then came the fire and burned the stick. Then came the water and quenched the fire. Then came the ox and drank the water that quenched, and so forth. So the video will be coming your way. I'll get it to Sharon after this meeting, and you'll have a lot of fun with that. And if you watch it for a few times, you'll be good to go for your simcha, your celebration.
Wow, most people had no idea how talented Andy is. That's really amazing. The hand signals are very, very, very impressive.
Well, I'll tell you a quick funny thing about that. So once I teach the kids, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, in Rosh Hashanah, they want to learn that song. And for Hanukkah, and for Purim and Tu B'Shvat. They can't wait. You can't get enough of that.
That's great.
I keep having to say later.
As you probably know, Chad Gadya, as Andy indicated, is Aramaic. The word Chad is related to a Hebrew word which you've heard all the time, Echad. Adonai Echad is one, but in Aramaic it comes out Chad. And Gadya is Aramaic for a goat or a kid. In Hebrew it's Gad, but in Aramaic it's Gadya. So Aramaic is a derivative of Hebrew, very similar to it with certain nuances. You also have heard Aramaic in the Kaddish. The Kaddish is Aramaic, not Hebrew. Written with Hebrew letters, many of the words are the same or similar, but it's a little bit different. It's what was spoken by Jews 2,000 years ago living under Roman occupation.
Well, real quick, while you mention Chad Gadya again, what's brilliant about that text is that it has 2 purposes. It keeps the kinder engaged with an animal tale, but actually it's a history lesson, and I'll let I won't steal Rabbi's thunder. He can explain the symbols of each entity. But while we're on the theme of Aramaic did not belong to the Hebrews exclusively. It was actually in the region throughout the Middle East. And today there are people in Syria and Iraq that still speak, Christians mostly, that speak Aramaic.
Different versions of it. There's different forms of Aramaic depending on whether it's spoken by the Jews, by the Syrians in different places.
Speaking of Aramaic, Rabbi mentioned welcoming the stranger and this family from Ukraine that will soon be in our community. The opening line of the Magid, Halachma, Halachma anyati achalu vatana be'ara de Mitzrayim, be'ara de Mitzrayim. This is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who wish to celebrate join us. This year we are slaves. Next year may we be free people. Halachma, halachma anyati achalu hatana be'ara de Mitzrayim, be'ara de Mitzrayim.
Now, Andy, I don't want you to answer this, but I'm going to ask everybody else. I'm going to test your Aramaic now. I told you it sounds like Hebrew, but it's not exactly. What word in that song? Well, what does lachma mean? Halachma. Who knows what that means? Anybody want to take a guess? Lachma. Take off the at the end. And what do you got? Motzi.
Lechem.
There you go. Right. So in Hebrew, lechem. Right. Lechem in Hebrew and in Aramaic, lachma means bread. And what's very interesting is to look at Aramaic and see, like a detective, what words can I figure out in Aramaic based on what I know about Hebrew? And it's very interesting to do that. If you're reading the Kaddish sometime, like the first word of the Kaddish is yitzgadal. In Hebrew, the word for big or large is gadol. Yitgadal. Gadol is the root in Yitgadal. It's talking about the creative power behind all this universe. It's Gadal. It's big. Yit Kadash. It's Kodesh. It's holy. And so Shemay is Shem. It's the name. Rabbah is great. May its name Shem be great. So it's very interesting. Next time you're reading the Kaddish, take a look at it and see what the words are, and you'll recognize some of the Hebrew words in the Kaddish. You can play detective. As Andy invited me to explain the Chad Gadya, which I'm sure most people know, and I'm not going to go into every little detail, but I just want to share with you that the goat, is the Jewish people. They were redeemed or ransomed by God with the 2 tablets of the covenant. And obviously this is imagery and symbolic language. And so we were rescued or redeemed by the moral law, the 2 tablets. And then one empire after another came after us. They destroyed us, but it was always temporary. Another empire then came and destroyed them. And then another empire destroyed them. And when you hear the song, you realize how pointless it is. This constant love of power and trying to destroy other people, it's only going to end up causing your destruction as well, until at the end of the narrative, then the angel of death comes over and destroys everything, and then God comes and destroys the angel of death. The whole point of Passover really is looking forward to Messianic times, when the Jewish people and the whole world are going to be redeemed, and we'll be able to create a world of peace and paradise. How that's going to happen, how will death itself be conquered? The Jewish people never really got into it too much and never really fleshed that out, which I think is to our credit. We kind of have this sense or this hope that one day, even death will lose its sting. One day we'll live in Messianic times, but we focus our efforts here on this world. Another interesting thing about Passover is that the role of Moses is downplayed. Moses, the hero of the story, downplayed. Why? Because they don't want to focus on Moses and say, Moses did this, Moses did that, Moses. we didn't want to deify Moses, and we really wanted to put the emphasis on Jewish ideals, not personalities. In the Torah, those ideals are personified in God, who orchestrated it and liberated us and did everything. Modern Jews, cosmic Jews, progressive, liberal, reform, reconstructionist Jews, we understand the deliverance of our people to be because we cling to Jewish ideals, values, courage, valor, and striving to overcome tyranny and leaving our comfort zone. But we share something very in common with our ancient ancestors. We don't personify our deliverance. We attribute it to Jewish values and Jewish ideals. Go ahead, Andy.
So in order to find a middle path between rabbis, God's over here and Moses over there, I would say that God is us. The entirety of humanity is the manifestation of God. Many of you are familiar with the film from Pixar from many years ago called Prince of Egypt. And there is a particular song that I am most fond of called In Heaven's Eyes. And basically, if you write that down and go Google it on search for it on YouTube, it's an amazing lyric. And it basically says that nothing about the castle or the mountain or the whatever's holy is the byproduct of the work of everyone's hands. The tabernacle was the byproduct of all, from the lowest to the mightiest, the top. Anyway, so you have that idea there. So
I also want to give you a taste of what you're going to hear at the Passover Seder. One of my original songs to Simon and Garfunkel. I'm going to share with you the first verse of it, which I think remember. It goes, "Are you going to the Passover Seder? Parsley, egg, horseradish, and wine. To celebrate freedom, nothing is greater, as we seek to approach the divine." And as Andy says, the divine, we believe in modern rational Judaism, is not something external. It's not external to us. There's divinity, holiness, sacredness in all of us, in all living things. And we have the capacity to be instrumental in deliverance and bringing freedom to others, especially when we work collectively as a Jewish people with all the other people. That is really our goal on Passover, not to wait passively for deliverance to come down from heaven, but to realize that we can be part of that deliverance.
So I'm gonna do a quick rewrite. I know Rabbi loves it when I do a rewrite, but that phrase, that last phrase, as we seek a glimpse of the divine, as we create a world reflecting yours and mine.
I'll accept your rewrite. You got to get rid of a few syllables to fit it all in, but that's pretty good. Anybody else want to share anything about Passover, what's going on in the world, or anything that you've heard about? Anybody at all? Valerie?
I'm just very grateful that my niece and her husband and my sister-in-law's 8-month pregnant daughter, who all live in Brooklyn and ride the subways every morning because they're teachers, are safe. And I'm just giving thanks to that.
Yeah. Anybody else? Go ahead, Sharon.
I have a question about, I know you talked a lot about Aramaic, and a couple of the songs are in Aramaic as well as the Kaddish. So why do you think our Passover songs are in the Aramaic, and why weren't they converted to Hebrew after all this time?
Well, the answer is very clear. Passover is a holiday that evolved and developed over the eons. So it was not something, what we do today in a Passover Seder is not what the Jews would have done in the days of Moses. And even the Passover meal and everything else is very, very different. So what happened? There was a legendary story about the Exodus, and then the Jews living in Babylonian times and Persian times and Roman times and Greek times, they evolved a way of celebrating Passover, and some of those ways occurred during the Roman occupation, doing a couple of thousand years ago. Remember, we've been celebrating Passover for 3,000 years. And over those 3,000 years, we've developed many customs and traditions. Many people erroneously think, oh, all of this started out with Moses and we're doing, no. It's what we're doing at Va-Dor, evolving, changing, adapting. It is absolutely no different than what Judaism's been doing since the get-go. The freezing of it is what's an aberration, the gradual unrolling evolution. So when we see something in Aramaic, whether it's Had Gadya or the Kaddish, it gives us a clue when this was written. It was written at a time that people were not fluent in Hebrew. It was written at a time when they spoke. That was a spoken language, Aramaic, just like we speak English. So we have songs in English, Jewish songs in English. They have Jewish songs in Aramaic. Another very interesting thing is that many of these customs evolved while we were living under a Greek influence, sometimes under absolute Greek rule. But even after the Greeks no longer ruled directly over Judea, the Middle East was awash in Greek thinking, Greek language, Greek culture. That's why we have the 4 questions. That's the Socratic method. The way that you teach children in Greek philosophy is with questions. The way that you show that you're free in Greek culture is to incline, is to lean, which we do. The way that we say in Greek after the meal is afikomen. That's a Greek word. Well, why don't they use a Hebrew word? Because they actually spoke Greek at that time, just like we don't speak Hebrew. We speak English, but we still have retained our Jewish culture and Hebrew. So that's the reason why we have things in various languages and have a strong Greek influence. And the Maccabean result at Hanukkah was really a clash. It's a clash between those who said, let's be modern. Let's embrace Greek culture. That's the way of the world. You guys are living in a backwater. You guys who are doing all these Jewish customs and Jewish rituals and things like that. Get with the program. Let's be Greek. And then others were saying no. And then the reason why the issue, that there was a tension there, but what forced the issue was when Antiochus ruled with a heavy hand and forbade the worship of Judaism. At that point, that galvanized the people, strengthened the militants, and then got them to fight back. And actually, there was a civil war before they even got to the Greeks. If you notice in the story, Mattathias kills a Jewish person who said, wait, I like Greek ways. And he killed them, and there was a civil war. And then the Jews were united to fight against Greek. But that's why we have many influences in Judaism. And I think that's why we're stronger, because we've learned from these other cultures along the way. Go ahead, Andy.
Okay, so Rabbi, once again, always triggers my thinking. That's why I love him so. So he mentioned the idea of this duality. We've got the Greek influence and our Hebrew Judaic influence. So you might say bi-cultural, if you will. And we also have to think about how we interact with the world. We're cognitive and we're also affective. And think about how our legislator is bicameral. And the premise there would be that we need to have a dual or a multi, not even dual, but a multi-level approach to how we embrace the world, how we traverse, reality. And getting back to what Rabbi was talking about, the tension between the zealots, if you will, and the more secularists and everything in between, an amazing book, and I would say it's one of the most profound books I've ever read, As a Driven Leaf. Now, this book sat on my shelf for about 5 years before someone said, you really need to read this book. Now, I read the book when I broke my leg a little over 10 years ago, so I had some time on my hands to sit. But this book, I won't get into all the details, but it speaks about someone who was raising his child to be outward looking, embracing Greek culture while also accepting Judaism to some degree, versus being insular and draw in. And Rabbi could probably talk at length about this book, but I would once again, as a driven leaf, and perhaps Rabbi has something to say about that.
Well, I'll just share this before we conclude, that today we have that same dynamic and sometimes that same tension. The ultra-Orthodox represent those who believe that we should cling to Jewish culture and not really be influenced so much by the American culture. And there's a lot of Jews, especially among the Reform, the more progressive ones, who have totally embraced American culture, American style democracy, American liberal values. And there's kind of a tension there also. There's also the tension in Greek times. The Greeks really invented science. They were the first scientists, and they said that the way we understand the world is through science and reason. And the old timers, the Jewish traditionalists said, no. The science is not the way at all. The way to understand the world is revelation through God. And so there's a really clear clash there. And there was a guy named Philo, who was a Jewish philosopher, who tried to integrate Judaism and Greek ways of thinking. And he said, no, the way to do it is to take the best of both worlds. Maimonides tried to do the same thing also. He tried to take the science of his day and unite that with the Judaism of his day in order to create something that was better than before. And we do that at Va-Dor also. We take science and the truths of science, but we don't let it overshadow Judaism. We also consider the truths of Judaism vitally important, and we try to unite the two so that we can be strengthened, so that science and religion can be strengthened by revelations from both. How to integrate that? Some people think that they can't be integrated. They think there's two realms. Science explains the world as it is. Religion explains the world as it ought to be. Science explains the world which is, and religion explains why is there a world? Why are we here? That's how some people explain the dichotomy. I reject that dichotomy completely. I believe that we need both in order to understand our place in the world. That science can explain a lot of things, and so can religion. Together, working in a united way, we can do great things. That's really the whole concept behind cosmic Judaism, behind what our congregation is doing. Reform purports to do that, purports to integrate science and religion, but science goes by the wayside when it clashes with certain religion. What we do is there's science is not given short shrift. We take the evidence where it leads us, as well as Jewish ideals, and there's no conflict between the two. Go ahead, Andy.
Getting back to your discussion of the spectrum of Judaism, that's where Reconstructionism comes in. Reconstructionism was like Reform 2.0, if you will, where it embraced much of what Rabbi's been saying, and which brings to mind, as I grabbed my guitar, this text, which comes from the Reconstructionist prayer book. As we bless the source of light, so we are blessed. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. And the blessing gives us strength and makes our visions clear. And the blessing gives us peace and the courage to dare. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. As we bless the source of light, so we are blessed. And to the extent that we embrace both the material and the spiritual, reminds me of that song by Sting, we are spirits living in a material world, our spirits. You know, if you're not familiar with that, check it out. Sting is one of the most profound songwriters in the 20th century. But that song, once again, I think bridges that divide, or that alleged divide, between religion and science.
Right. The
We have
founder
light.
of the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, Mordecai Kaplan, did attempt to integrate the two, and he talked about the power of evolution and said that evolution sheds great light on our beginnings, and believed Judaism was an evolving culture. The problem is that the current Reconstructionist movement leaves many questions up to the individual congregation. They don't follow science where it leads. They just say, well, when it comes to God, believe whatever you want, more power to you. We don't have any specific beliefs. When it comes to the authorship of the Torah, you can believe whatever you want. That's not a scientific way of thinking at all. Science doesn't say, well, when it comes to is the earth round or flat, hey, whatever you want to believe, it's all good. Or do we revolve around the sun or the sun revolve around us? We'll leave it up to the congregation to figure it out. That's not science. That's the antithesis of it. What we attempt to do, which is very bold and daring, I believe, is to actually follow science where it leads. Some people would rather believe things that make them feel good rather than what is. And that's why what we're doing is it's a challenge. It's challenging to people to hear evidence-based religion, not religion that's just telling people what they want to hear. And I have found that many religious leaders tell people what they want to hear because they want to keep them as congregants. They don't even believe what they're saying. They just want to get as many congregants as possible. So if the people want to hear living happily ever after, or somebody's watching over you, or whatever it is, they tell them that. We will not do that at Va-Dor. We will inspire people with what's real. And I happen to believe that what's real and what's true is as inspiring as anything that's make-believe. The world as it is, and our lives as they are, and the Jewish heritage and the Jewish values that we cherish are as idealistic and inspiring and motivational as anything I can think of. Well, it's been a pleasure being with everybody tonight. Thank you for tuning in. I encourage you to join with us on Passover. It's going to be a lot of fun, very inspiring. You'll hear a lot of interesting commentary on Passover and the links with what's going on in Ukraine. And I hope to see you then. I thank Sharon very much for organizing this and for allowing this to take place. I thank Cantor Andy Susman for leading us and for joining in and leading this conversation. It was really wonderful. If you're interested in hearing my 10 signs that you're a Republican Seder, if you want to get the lyrics to Are You Going to the Passover Seder to share with your friends, or if you want to help with Ukrainian refugees in some way, let me know. You can contact me, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, everybody. Chag Sameach. See you soon.
Sameach. Thank you, guys.